well, I won't be using any science at all, because I am not a scientist, and I won't be talking about data. I will be talking about an idea. The recent van massacre in Toronto brought the term incel, short for involuntarily celibate, into common usage when it was revealed that the man in the van, Alec Minassian, identified with that grievance-collecting, internet-based constituency. The text for the incels is a humanity-indicting manifesto entitled My Twisted World, issued by 22-year-old masochist Elliot Rodger, who blamed bullying high school boys and the pretty girls they attracted, but who rejected him, for his social isolation and rage. Rodger killed 6 young men and women and injured several others during a May 2014 rampage in Isla Vista, California, after which he killed himself. A theatrical type, Rodger came through in his videos as a fantasist, projecting himself as a kind of James Bond-like sophisticate, somebody who deserved the adoration of women, and in a suave, affected manner, Rodger at one point referred to himself as the supreme gentleman. The trope went viral because, after all, what could be more horribly paradoxical than a gentleman who hates all humanity and whose most animating desire is to torture and murder women? One blogger likened Rodger to the character Patrick Bateman in the 1987 film American Psycho, if any of you have seen it, in which Christian Bale played exactly that role. By day, a handsome, successful man of impeccable manners and comportment, rewarded by effortless access to sex with beautiful women, by night a blood-drenched psychopathic monster. The trope stayed with me because, as someone coming from a literary background, the word gentleman has far more complex resonance than the seemingly superficial aspect of self-presentation that fascinated Elliot Rodger. And I say seemingly because it is possible that Rodger, in his own pathological way, had sussed out something in our culture, something in the historically unprecedented nature of male-female relations ushered in by feminism that contains a legitimate seed for male grievance. It should go without saying that Rodger's and Minassian's actions were appalling, and that the theme I am about to elaborate is in no way a justification for any man's active hatred for women or humanity in general, but obviously I do have to say that to forestall the Twitter mobbing that will inevitably result once somebody hears me say this. My point is only this, that even very disturbed people want to believe that their violence is a response to an injustice. They may take in by osmosis a vibe, an unhealthy social or cultural attitude, beginning at the top and wafting downward and across society, and I would emphasize coming from the top, people who are in political or cultural authority, that accumulates as a kind of psychological plaque in their unconscious, permitting detonation of their hatred on those they perceive as a threat to themselves and society. A case in point, in 2012, when Pauline Marois was the leader of the Parti Québécois, she ran a fear-based provincial campaign on the alleged fragility of French in Quebec, expressing open hostility to the English language with first covert and then overt encouragement for popular revulsion at hearing English spoken. She even complained about people using it in the privacy of their homes. This was a level of Anglo-baiting unprecedented in my memory as a long-time resident of Quebec. It is fair to say that a filament of language fascism began to glow somewhat red in the political air. At the height of this tension, 48-year-old Alex Montreuil, visiting Montreal's Jewish General Hospital, which is a predominantly Anglo institution, for a CT scan, went to the cafeteria for lunch. He explained to the woman making the sandwiches, in English, that he was violently allergic to tomatoes and asked that she don fresh latex gloves before making his sandwich to avoid any trace of tomato from previous handling. She happily complied. As Montreuil was eating, a 30-something woman approached his table and screamed at him in French, "Here we speak French, not English." Montroy responded, "In my city, in my country, I can speak the language of my choice." The woman withdrew for a few minutes, then returned and threw a tomato sandwich at Montroy's face. Within seconds, his face and body were swelling dangerously. Poisoned political or cultural air is not good for grievance collectors with poor impulse control. This woman was disturbed, possibly paranoid, but she had likely taken her reason for acting out her inchoate rage from the political toxins in the air around her. Are mentally damaged incels channeling a similar gender toxin that's in the air? I think they may be. The trope supreme gentleman is the clue. For the word gentleman is code for the concept of male honor in Western culture, just as the word lady used to be code for female honor. Lady is, of course, rarely used today, unless in irony, for the word calls forth an image of womanhood, sexually repressed, self-effacing, creatively stifled, that bespeaks oppression under patriarchy. What is honor? I think James Bowman, author of the wonderful book, 2006 book called Honor, A History, offers a succinct and sense-making definition when he says, "Honor is the good opinion of those who are important to you." Honor is not synonymous with morality. If you are a member of the mafia or of Islamic State, honor may be a driving force for murder. For the Marine Corps, though, it is honor, not morality, that will send members back into the thick of battle to rescue a fallen comrade. Morality is a private affair, but as Alexis de Tocqueville wrote, honor acts solely for the public eye. Although its hold on Western life today is fragile, a sense of honor is not entirely moribund in our culture. Honor codes still flourish in the military, as I noted, and although we are not always able to articulate what honorable behavior consists in, we usually have an instinctive grasp of what constitutes dishonorable behavior. Honor, Bowman says, is moreover sex-specific and immutable. Male honor is rooted in physical courage. Women's honor is rooted in sexual modesty. Thus, most men are not offended at being called Lotharios, but they are deeply insulted, or at least ashamed, to be called out as cowardly. Conversely, most women are not in the least ashamed to be called risk-averse or even cowardly, I know I'm not, but they will be offended if they are called sluts. In the West, ancient honor codes combined with Christianity to form the ideal of chivalry, and with it the concept of the gentleman and the lady. According to the chivalric code, men are obliged to respect the sexual boundaries that women erect, protect women from or rescue women in distress, commit to domesticity as the price of sexual and patrilineal tranquility, and observe the amenities that create a social atmosphere where women can shine. According to the code, women show respect and admiration for men performing acts of courage or unusual competence, demonstrate high selectivity in their bestowal of sexual favors, and conduct themselves with the kind of restraint that promises sexual trustworthiness to a future partner. Most important, according to the code, men agree to refrain from ever using their superior physical strength against women, potentially dangerous as it may be in the heat of emotional conflict, and women agree to refrain from using their great power to sexually shame and humiliate men, potentially dangerous when casually deployed against fragile and unstable targets. Needless to add, most of these ideals, although paid universal lip service for centuries, were often observed in the breach. We no longer recognize that honor paradigm, of course, or rather, we no longer recognize half of that paradigm. For even though honor as a driver for behavior is almost entirely vestigial in our culture, the concept of the gentleman has not been completely plowed under by the feminist juggernaut. Gentlemen linger on in popular culture not because men refuse to let it die, but because women want it to live. To illustrate, the highly successful 2001 film Bridget Jones' Diary was meant to be a contemporary update of the Jane Austen novel Pride and Prejudice. I don't know how many of you have read it, but I hope some of you have. It's a wonderful book. In the original early 19th century novel, the archetypal English gentleman, Mr. Darcy, is finally united in marriage with the archetypal English lady, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, after negotiation over and around a series of obstacles set up by his pride and her prejudice. Both characters exhibit exactly the kind of behavior at all times that I have described above. But in this film, Bridget, supposedly the modern Elizabeth, is a chain smoker, a binge eater, a domestic slob, and a heavy boozer, not to mention a gal who finds bad boys attractive. To drive home the point, she is shown at the film's beginning being willingly sodomized on a first date with a known cad. Bridget wins her men through casual sexual availability signaled by provocative dress and affect. She is the exact opposite of the original sexually modest Elizabeth, who wins her man through sparkling wit, self-discipline, family loyalty, and strength of character, showing evidence at every plot turn of an incorruptible value system, extreme dignity under duress, and respect for others with high moral standards. Eminently well-suited in character, if not social standing, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth deserve one another because they are honorable peers, and prove it. Strangely, almost 2 centuries later, in Bridget Jones' Diary, Mark Darcy has not changed one whit from the original Mr. Darcy. He's a clone. In actor Colin Firth's faithful role reprisal, Darcy is still rich, scholarly, respected, well-mannered, diffident, and slightly prickly in much the same way as Jane Austen's Mr. Darcy. But Bridget is so very far from replicating Elizabeth that even in a comedy, their union is by any stretch of the viewer's imagination inexplicable. Mark claims to like her just the way you are, but that is pure wishful thinking on the part of the scriptwriters. How could a real Mr. Darcy, for whom social vulgarity was anathema, respect, let alone find attraction in anyone so common, so coarse, so lacking in self-possession, so not Elizabeth Bennet? The film appealed to feminists because they approved the message. Here was a heroine who indulges all her appetites without curbs or consequences, who admits to no social or civic or family responsibilities of the kind that are always uppermost in Mark Darcy's mind, who mooches through life with next to no ambition, and who exercises bad judgment in choosing men and precipitately promiscuous behavior in trying to hold them. Yet in the end, none of that matters because manly Mark Darcy, gentle, upright, honorable Mr. Darcy, who can have anyone, chooses to marry Bridget Jones because she is adorable. In real life, however, a man of Mark Darcy's character and values would be repelled by Bridget Jones. Bridget Jones and Mark Darcy's screen characters illuminate a curious postmodern cultural paradox. The gentleman must at all costs remain a gentleman in the same 200-year-old mold Jane Austen describes. On the other hand, the lady may act like what we used to call a tramp. But the modern gentleman is not only constrained from judging such women's behavior as sluttish, he is obliged to endorse, no, to embrace it, or be himself judged a misogynist. You may have seen the 2015 film, Amy Schumer's film, Trainwreck, which posits a more traditional anti-feminist ending where the woman reforms her behavior and fearing she's going to lose the man, does a complete turnaround. But the attraction of the gentlemanly sports doctor in that movie, Aaron, to hyper-slutty Amy in the first place seems equally inexplicable. The ending, in fact, elicited criticism of Schumer's film as a betrayal. Our society is dominated by theorists who hold that gender roles are socially constructed and that we have only to wish our instincts malleable to have them become so. If the theorists were correct, then men would accept the half-broken, honor-based contract with grace. Many highly educated men do, for campus life, is marinated in feminist dogma, which holds female interests dear and men's interests cheap. Certainly, the men that are getting lots of sex are happy to show outward deference to an untenable theory as the price to pay for it. Less culturally elite men, however, resent the new gender contract in which women have rights without responsibility and men have responsibilities without rights. Of course, they do not normally act out that resentment in violence. Still, it simmers. That is not a good thing. Then there are the men that are getting no sex, even though they believe they are acting as gentlemen should, and who see other men, how much? 4 minutes, okay. And who see other men, seemingly no more attractive than themselves, getting all the sex they want from women who have no apparent code of sexual honor whatsoever, and who, they feel, because they are disturbed, are somehow conspiring to shame and humiliate them. They feel dishonored. And I repeat, because they are disturbed, like the Montreal tomato lady, but a million times more horribly, they seek to redress their shame. The jettisoning of honor as a criterion for judging the behavior of others has been the assiduously pursued task of progressives throughout the 20th century and beyond in the West. Conversely, the application of honor as the only criterion in judging the behavior of others, notably the sexual behavior of girls and women, is a pivotal cultural driver in the Middle East and South Asia. Both of these ideologically rooted drives represent poles of honor-related extremism. Both are socially destructive of healthy relations between the sexes, and both tend to obscure the fact that in moderation, honor is a good force in society. Nobody is pretending that men and women today should aspire to replicate the social conditions in which the relationship of Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet played out in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, but there is a reason that this honorable couple continues to attract fascinated and even envious attention from every new generation of women who discovers them. Something in our nature craves the constraints and produces the rewards that an honor code, but of course a rationally and mutually beneficial honor code suited to our individual era, can confer. Societies with strong honor codes produce men and women who develop a keen sense of personal responsibility, which is good for society as a whole. Too little, and nothing seems worth fighting for. Too much, and everything seems worth dying for. Finding the balance is the key.